Welcome to the Bizibuz webinar on COVID-related child behavioural issues. Thank you for joining us today. I'm a Hong Kong parent of 2 children and so equally concerned with today's topic. I'm also the founder of Bizibuz, which is an after-school activity platform for parents. We use technology to optimize parent selection of after-school activities, and we completely automate the purchase and management of those activities, even the administrative nightmare of reschedulings and cancellations. If you're interested in joining our community, please follow the link pasted on the chat. And also you can follow us on Facebook if you're interested to receive parenting tips. Now I'd like to welcome Ms. Liu Liu, who is a nationally certified school psychologist in the US and holds a specialist education degree in school psychology and a Bachelor of Psychology. She also has extensive experience working with children and their families, specifically in an educational context. Welcome, Ms. Liu Liu.
Hi.
Oh, and just one housekeeping point. Parents, if you're interested in asking Ms. Liu Liu any questions during today's webinar, please go to the icon, which is on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It looks like a triangle, circle, and square. Click on that, and then you can just type in your questions, and we'll try to address these questions at the end of the webinar. So, Ms. Liu Liu, the reality of COVID parenting in Hong Kong through the past month or so has involved being confined to an apartment, scared that if you step out, you'll inadvertently expose your children to illness, fighting for internet bandwidth to make a living for yourself and to ensure your children are receiving an education. And that's just from a parent's perspective. For children, it's involved long hours in front of screens, minimal exercise and peer social contact, disruptions to a typical schedule, exposure to parental stress. I could go on and on. So it's not surprising that this environment has been ripe for mental and behavioral problems for both parents and children. Focusing on the impact on children for a minute, as someone that has a lot of experience in treating children at home and at school, I'm curious, have you seen an increase in behavioral issues recently?
Yes, absolutely. I think recently in the past year, a lot of parents came to us with concerns about kids' attention, especially when there are increased amount of time kids are spending in front of screen. And the parents started to say, oh, they don't really focus much during online school. They may be chatting, watching videos, or doing something else when the class is going on. And also at home, like they wouldn't sit down for an extended period of time to complete their homework. So we have complaints from teachers about missing homework, not completed projects. And we have also some concerns from parents about emotional difficulties, so like anxiety and depressed mood.
Okay. And in terms of, I guess, some of the behavioral issues, so you're saying it's more manifesting in the form of attention disruption in terms of anxiety. Are you seeing any other kind of behavioral issues more recently that you haven't tended to have seen as much in the past and that you feel are directly related to the pandemic?
I think a lot of things, pandemic has exacerbated things. So we have issues that we've seen pre-pandemic, then after, like during the pandemic, they definitely get more heightened. The intensity gets more severe and the frequency has increased. So one thing we see the most, they present as difficulties, but there could be a lot of underlying causes that lead to attention difficulties. So it could be my child's time focusing, and asking them to sit in front of a computer for an extended period of time. It's really challenging. Even for adults to just sit down in front of a computer and focus for 30 minutes is hard. So when kids have online classes that's 45 minutes, an hour, to ask them to sit there and not move is asking a lot of them. Another thing we see is with pandemic, there are a lot of research coming out last year and this year as well. What they're looking at is really the impact of the whole pandemic, and also if kids go into quarantine, what's going to happen. Like right now, if kids couldn't go out and they don't have social connections and all the things are online, what are the things we see? So what they found is an increased level of anxiety, depression, and a combination of both. And this study specifically done in Asia, what they see is among the age of 3 and 18, they see an increase of inattention, cleaning needs for parents, they worry more, and they also see irritability. So with irritability, I want to talk a little bit about depression because we see that. So anxiety is not unsurprising because there's an abruptness. Kids are in school one day, the next day they were told, you're going to do online schooling, and they participate in activity with their friends one day, the next day they're not. So it's that abruptness and the cute nature kind of disrupt their routine, and the predictability in their life has gone. And that creates a lot of anxiety for kids, for adults as well. So if we think adults, if you go to a different place, or if you go to a job interview, there's a level of anxiety in there. A little bit anxiety is good, but too much anxiety and constantly, it will lead to problems and impairment. So kids are more anxious, and that's not a surprise. But another thing with depression is when we think about depressed mood in adults, we see people being sad, they couldn't get out of bed, they have really low energy. But in children, they look a little bit differently. So with kids that are experiencing depressed mood, what they may show is irritability. They get angry so easily, and the parents say something, they get defensive and they shout back. And that's an increase that we see as well.
That's interesting. And have you noticed that certain age groups are impacted more than others? So is it, you mentioned difficulty with attention and also, I guess, comfort around a specific schedule. Are those characteristics things that you notice more with the younger age group? Are you seeing that older students, adolescents, etc., are coping a little bit better? What's your experience in terms of age?
I feel like all ages are being affected. they just may present a little bit differently. So if we think about child development, one thing that we think about is their social development. So when kids are younger, their main source of social support are their parents. They have a problem, they go to their parents. They have something they need, they go to their parents. But when they enter into teenagers, adolescents, they shift their social group to their friends. So they kind of step away from their parents a little bit, and they go more for their friends. And with the pandemic, and the kids are stuck at home all the time, they don't have that valuable social interaction. They don't have as much social support. So they have difficulties, like for older kids. But for younger kids, the pandemic impact parents as well. Their parents, they lose their jobs, they're reduced income. There are a lot of stress constantly, and their change of policy every day. So it's hard for parents to keep up with the change in the world. It creates stress, and the kids feel that as well. So all ages affected, it's just they may be a little bit different.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. Just a reminder, we've had some late joiners. If you're interested in asking Ms. Lulu any questions during today's webinar, please go to the icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It looks like a triangle, circle, and square. If you click on that, you can type in your questions in the chat area, and then we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. So, Ms. Lulu, is there a difference along socioeconomic lines? Are you noticing, for example, more behavioral issues in, say, lower income families because of things like the smaller living space that people may be subject to, or if parents are suffering more stress because they're living a little bit more hand to mouth, or maybe the more technology access challenges, which themselves are very stressful? What are you noticing in that sense?
I feel like it's a complicated question to answer. I'm going to phrase. So for children who are already disadvantaged, so in terms of if they're being in really good schools that has a lot of support available even during online learning, or they have really good parental support, they don't suffer as much during like online learning. But for kids who are so dependent on the school for their personal growth, and they will get hit the hardest. So when we think about school, we may think, oh, my kid go to school to get good grades, but school provide additional supports as well. So for kids may have more unstable family, school is like a refuge for family dramas, and school gives them routine, gives them opportunity to participate in different activities, also gives them a sense of community. So when suddenly the school is closed, it creates disruption and for all these supports. And so kids that has less support and depend in their family and depend on school for support, or they're already economically dischallenged, they do suffer from the effects of COVID more.
Okay. And you would have heard the saying, children are much more resilient than we give them credit for. Having lived through what you've lived through over the past few months and seen this exacerbation that you mentioned with the pandemic, do you agree with this statement? Do you feel like, parents should not gloss over the consequences of the pandemic? I mean, what's your view here? And do you think that even though what we're seeing is obviously, very tied to the circumstances in which kids and parents are now finding themselves, do you think that children will bounce back quickly if things normalize? And what's your perspective here?
It's sort of in the unknown, isn't it? Because it hasn't been over and we really don't know the long-term consequences. I do agree with this saying. I think children in many ways, they're more resilient than we give credit for. But I think there's a fine line of being overprotective parents and gets nervous about every single change my child has to I feel like children are very resilient. So if they're in their room for 3 weeks in a row, I'm not too concerned. So there's really a fine line for parents to discover and to define for their own child. But there are studies that are quite positive. What they found, because the pandemic, the online learning, one aspect that gets impacted most is that social interaction offline, because the online interaction, a lot of kids seek interaction online and they play games and do different activities, and that interaction really couldn't replace the complexity of face-to-face interaction. So for example, if I'm in a screen talking to you, and if you're not interested in what I'm saying, and if you look somewhere else, I couldn't tell if it's because you're not interested in what I'm saying, or you have people working in the background in your house, and you get distracted. So a lot of this nuance in the communication gets lost in this online social interaction. And then a lot of social support, because they're limited online, and the amount of social support may be reduced as well. So what they found, in Europe, there's a group of researchers, what they look at is pro-social behavior. So what they specifically look at is how young people direct their help towards their families or friends. What they found is for teenagers aged 15 to 17 years old, they actually start to offer a lot more support towards their peers. They could be checking on their peers online, they could be making positive comments, and they provide different type of support. And for youth age 18 to 25, they have more pro-social experience towards their families. So what this study is saying, yes, there are a lot of difficulties created by this pandemic, but our children adapt. They develop new skills to cope with it. But at the same time, we all experience stress. They would have more emotional challenges. So I think what I would say is parents should be hopeful because our kids can adapt, but also be cautious because they tend to have more difficulties during this time.
And so you've obviously mentioned a whole range of different behaviors there that you've seen more of and that are a concern, like the inattention, irritability, anxiety, depression, etc. Are there particular behaviors that you find more concerning, and so parents should be, more quick to seek help if they see them? Is it, increased aggression that would be, at the top of your list, or is it, because it sounds like poor attention span is, is something you see very, very, very frequently, especially in the younger children. Like, what is that spectrum of, the most concerning symptoms of, maybe behavioral challenges for a child that you would tell parents if you do see these sorts of behaviors, you should seek additional help?
So the first one was increased aggression. I didn't see much in my personal experience. Typically, if kids have increased aggression, they probably have aggressive behaviors pre-pandemic, and typically they're among kids with language difficulties. So they have a lot of stress. They couldn't really express how they feel or how they think really well. The easiest way for them is to act it out. So as parents, to help their kids, one way is to give your child the language they're looking for. So maybe your child has a hard time describe how they're feeling. You could say, oh, you look like you're really angry. Or, oh, you look like you are getting agitated. So give them that vocabulary. They can express themselves a little bit better. That should help with aggression. But if parents feel like the aggression is, because some kids get really big, and sometimes parents may get injured if kids are physically aggressive towards them, and that's really a point to seek help, and because you need to protect yourself and to protect your child. Other things. So here I want to combine the online and the child development together and tell parents what to consider. So parents will experience a lot, will see their child has a lot of changes. They would spot these changes during the pandemic. They will spot these changes when kids enter puberty, teenage years. So you would see them has a shorter temper. You would see they probably would worry. Their emotional state probably are quite heightened. So maybe one day they were discussing with their friends, they have a disagreement, and it will end up with, "I'll never ever talk to you again." So things get escalated very quickly, and also kids, because their brain is still developing, there's this prefrontal cortex area that helps them make their decisions, helps them filter what they're thinking, and help them think through the consequences, still developing. So they may make really impulsive decisions. They may do some risk-taking behaviors parents are really terrified of. So for example, they might try alcohol with their friends. And also you might think, oh, my child is really good. They have always been behaving. I couldn't imagine why they would do something so outrageous, because the brain hasn't fully developed yet. They may make rash decisions. And also, because their friendship group is shifting slowly from parents to friends, parents may feel like, oh, my child is withdrawn from all the family interactions. So this can be normal, but this can be signs of difficulties that they need help. So my rule of thumb is, if parents feel like, oh, my child's changes are really impacting his or her school performance, impacting their daily life. So for example, it's easy for everybody to get sad every once in a while, but if my child is in her bedroom laying on the floor and not getting out for 3 days in a row, I would be really concerned. If my child is not sharing as much with me about his or her life, but she is spending a lot of time sharing her stories with her friends, I wouldn't be as much concerned. But if my child is shutting everybody down and not talking to anyone, I would be really concerned. So my rule is it impacting their daily functioning? Are they still able to complete their daily routine? If there's a significant disruption, then it's the point to ask for help.
Okay, understood. Yeah, that's very clear. In your view, do you think there is like one cause above others that may be contributing the most to these behavioral issues? Is it the disruption to the day-to-day schedule? So the changes, every few weeks when we go from remote learning to in-person learning and then back to remote learning. Is it too much screen time? Is it parental stress? And what do you think is the biggest contributor?
I feel like all of them contribute. So lack of a routine is a big thing, because without that stable routine, kids don't know what's going to happen. And that creates a source of anxiety. And we worry if we don't know what's going to happen. Too much screen time. Yes, if my child spends all her free time on the iPad or on her computer and I don't know what she's doing, then the social connection with parents is lost. Kids are using their screen for different purposes. There are kids that are online. So first, increased screen time is unavoidable. It's a reality we must all accept. And because of the pandemic, more and more kids are starting to play games. So last year, globally, 70% of youth has played computer games. So if your child is one that's doing the same thing, he's just one among a lot of others. And also, in the past, we always think, oh, boys likes to play games and girls don't do that. But the shift is now the ratio of boys and girls who play games are probably 50-50. So your daughter is just as likely to play online games on her computer.
I know this to be true. Yes.
Yes. So with a lot of kids start to use their screen to play games, there are different motivations for that. So play games because they experience too much stress in their surroundings. They don't know what to do. The only way they know to cope is to play games, and that's a source of escape for them. Some kids are really extroverted. They enjoy that social bonding. They get their energy from there. They probably play games to get that social interaction. And some kids are just really high achievers. They really like that game. They want to get to a certain level. They want to get a certain award, so they play for extended amount of times. So because of their different reasons, underlying reasons why kids playing games, if we know why they're doing what they're doing, we can teach them other ways to replace those.
And actually that, sorry, just a reminder for people who are joining late, because we do still have some people coming in. If you want to ask a question of Ms. Lulu, you can just click on the icon at the bottom right-hand side of your screen that looks like a triangle, a circle and a square. Click on that and then go to the Q&A section and you can put your questions there. We'll come to them very, very shortly. So before we run out of time, Ms. Lulu, I guess the big question is, what can parents do to cushion the negative impact that the pandemic may be having on their child's emotional well-being? Is there any pragmatic advice you can offer parents?
That's an awesome question. Because parental support is one of the biggest protective factors to protect child from developing mental health, like severe mental health difficulties. So depending, the first thing is keep an open communication with your child, so that they know when they have some difficulty, when they're experiencing stress, you're there available to talk to them. And probably their parents saying, my children are teenagers, they do not talk to me. But even everyone wants connection. So sometimes they need some positive experience connecting with their parents, so they're more willing to share more. Because a lot of times I hear children tell me, I don't want to share this with parents because I don't want to burden them. They're already really stressed. Or other times they feel like, oh, my parents don't understand me, so I don't talk to them. So in these times, when parents talk to their kids, you can just take 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day to sit down and talk to your kids, let them talk whatever they want. And as a parent, you're probably really, really eager to give advices when they come to you with problems. So in order to create a positive experience, just let your child talk. And you listen to what they have to say, you listen to how they feel, and you emphasize with what they're saying. Then they will come to their own conclusion. When they need help, they will come and ask you for help. And another thing more specifically is, if you're looking for ways to help your child with technology use and screen time, there's a resource. You can go to healthychildren.org. And that's a website developed, the American Academy of Pediatrics. They have a family media plan. And you can walk through the plan with your child and to establish boundaries, technology use boundaries in your home, and also teach them good manners when using technology.
Okay, great. I just put that chat in the messages area of the call for people. And what about things like how to try to supplement the lack of peer interaction? It's a tough one because I guess you can't entirely replace unstructured play, but is it at all useful to organize, I don't know, an online play date or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. Having something is better than nothing. And then sometimes, even if we don't have, maybe sometimes we don't have access to peers, we don't have online interactions with adults can be really helpful as well. We create social opportunities for kids to practice their skills, then hopefully they can generalize their skills once the world is opened up and they can interact with their peers.
Are there particular like socio-emotional learning opportunities that can do things like help build, I guess, a toolkit for a child to deal with these stressful times, or to deal with maybe more conscious social skill learning that needs to occur in the absence of practice? What would you advise on that front? Is there anything out there that might be available to parents?
Yep, there are several programs that I'm aware of. So Sprout has a program for itty bitty kids. So if your kids are between the age of 6, 7, and it's really the time they're beginning to learn all those subtle social skills. Sprout has a program called Social B, and they teach kids about social thinking. They teach them about turn taking. They teach them about how to greet others, how to respond appropriately. Looking at older kids with more social interaction, social communication challenges, I think Psychnemo has a program called PEERS. It's acronym for the Program for the Education and Enrichment of Relational Skills. They're typically for kids on the autism spectrum or kids with severe social difficulties, and it is an online program as well.
Oh, okay, great. Maybe as a follow-up, Ms. Lulu, you could share some of those links and we can make sure that they get distributed to the parents. Okay. Let's take some questions. So we have a question here that said, did you say just now kids' depression looks like low energy and can't get out of the bed? If so, how can we help the children?
Thank you for the question. Sometimes kids' depression looks like a low energy, can't get out of bed. Sometimes it looks like irritability, arguing back. So if your child is in bed first consult with a psychologist, psychiatrist, or your pediatrician, because just having signs of depression or anxiety doesn't mean they're depressed or anxious, and they can't get out of bed could be due to many reasons, and low energy could be due to many reasons, like if their diet is not very good, if they don't exercise regularly, if they have sleep difficulties is a big one. This could look very similar. So I would say first consult a professional and see what the source of the problem is, and then sort out ways to help your child. But if your child is diagnosed with depression and really have a hard time getting out of bed, and that's considered very severe, and sometimes they may need therapy, or they may need medical intervention, but that's a discussion to have with your child's pediatrician or psychiatrist.
Just obviously this is not on the spectrum of depression, but one technique I've been using with my own kids to try to ensure that they don't feel the day-to-day grind of the pandemic, like we do as parents, is to try to think of something that they can look forward to, even if it's something small, and so my kids will now ask me, Mummy, what's happening this coming week? And I know what they're really asking me is, okay, what do I have to look forward to? So I've made a conscious decision to try to think of something, and it can be something different, take them somewhere if you can, that sort of thing. So schedule something a little special. I don't know if hopefully that helps parents. We have another question. If I see some inappropriate behavior from my child, should I try to stop it immediately, or should I try to address it in a more gentle way?
It depends on the age of your child. I would also always recommend to address it in a more gentle way. If parents are addressing a harsh way, it becomes a punishment. And sometimes if a child is doing the inappropriate behavior for attention, even a harsh punishment is giving the child attention. So that kind of defeat the purpose of not having the child to do the behavior again. So sometimes kids do inappropriate behavior because they don't know. You could talk to your child why they're doing this, or then you can find out more. Or if your child is, well, I say behavior, if your child is doing this for attention, then sometimes ignoring. It depends on how severe the appropriate behavior is, and if ignoring works, if it's within the tolerable range and you feel like you can ignore it. Sometimes ignoring works really well, and you praise your child when they're engaging something appropriate. If your child is doing this behavior to escape from something, you could find a source that's making your child feel like they have to act this way, and they try to help them to deal with the source of the issue. So there are different ways, but I always recommend parents to address it in a more gentle way, because if you address it harshly, it creates more issues.
Yeah. Okay, no, that makes sense. And a final question, Ms. Lulu. Do you think that some of these mental and behavioral issues that are popping up in children during the pandemic, do you think that they're going to be long lasting?
It's hard to say.
Yeah, sorry, very tough question to end on.
Yeah, it's come back to if children are more resilient than we give credit for.
Yes.
I like to think a lot of issues are transient. Even before pandemic, when we think about mental health difficulties like anxiety, depression, we do think they're transient, because when they're having difficulties, we provide the support that they need. They could get through it, and it doesn't really impact them for life. Also, like prolonged stress do have some impact on people's brain development. So we really don't know what's going to happen. But my hope is, I hope it's transient. I hope our children can deal with it. And as parents, we can do a lot to support our kids to get through this time.
Yes. And look, we really, really appreciate all the practical advice that you've given to the parents here, Ms. Lulu. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you very much to Sprout in Motion for agreeing to participate in this webinar. I hope the parents have found it useful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.